Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Continue reading about Gaura-kisora Das Babaji Maharaj. And this is it's compiled by Karanamrta Das Prabhu. Jai. Thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, this is section 1, family life and renunciation. Srila Gaura-kisora Das Babaji Maharaj appeared sometime in the 1830s in the district of Faridapur, adjacent to the place called Tepakahol, in the village of Vagyana in East Bengal, or what is now known as Bangladesh. He appeared in that village, which is situated on the bank of the Padma River, as the son of a Vaishya, most probably called Vamsidas. According to one biographer, however, Vamsidas was the name of Srila Gaura-kisora before he took to the renounced order. During his boyhood, his mother and father arranged a marriage for him, and he remained in household affairs for more than 20 years. While a householder, he worked as a broker in the grain business, but even at that time he exhibited his spirituality. After the demise of his wife, Srila Gaura-kisora left his business and went to Vrindavan. There he approached Srila Bhagavat Das Babaji, one of the foremost disciples of Sri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, and accepted from him the traditional Paramahamsa Vaishnav Babaji dress. After this, he became completely renounced and sojourned under trees in various parts of the 168-mile Vrajamandala, or the circle of Vrindavan. He continually acted thus for a period of approximately 30 years. During this time, he would sometimes travel to the holy places of pilgrimage in northern and western India, as well as the Gaura-mandala, the circle of Navadvip. He associated with Srila Swarup Das Babaji Maharaj in Jagannath Puri, whose ecstatic activities were recounted by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his autobiography. He also associated with Srila Bhagavan Das Babaji in Kalna. He went to Kulia, the holy site of Sri Jagannath Das Babaji's bhajan, and associated with Srila Chaitanya Das Babaji. All of these Babajis were pure and exalted devotees. Srila Gaura-kisora Das Babaji became very famous among the great devotees of Vrindavan and was awarded the appropriate title of Bhajananandi. Even though he received such honor, he never endeavored for even a modicum of material sense gratification and totally disapproved of the secret material desires of pseudo-renunciates. He was entirely removed from such inclinations and would perform his own pure, unalloyed devotional pastimes alone in a profound devotional mood. In the year 1897, during the month of Phalgun, when he was in his 60s, and at the time when the Yoga Peak birth site of Sri Chaitanya was revealed by the exertions of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Gaura-kisora Das Babaji proceeded to Navadvip Dham from Vrindavan under the instruction of Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. From this time until his disappearance, Srila Gaura-kisora Das Babaji remained in Sri Navadvip Dham, living in different villages and realizing their non-difference from the holy places of Vrindavan. He begged by gathering dry foodstuffs from the householders of the holy Dham. He would sometimes offer those foodstuffs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the simple expedient of holding them in his hand. In order to cook, he would collect dry wood from the paths, and he would wash earthen pots discarded by the villagers along the roadside near the Ganges River on the occasion of eclipses. Due to the effects of an eclipse, such pots were considered impure and unusable. In order to clothe himself, he would go to the shore of the Ganges and collect and wash discarded cloth that had been used to cover corpses at the burning ghat. Thus, he always remained independent of the support of others, simply by utilizing items of no value to anyone else. In such a manner, he obtained practical necessities of life. In 1897, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur constructed his place of bhajan on the bank of the Saraswati River at Godrum, the island of the 9 islands of Navadvip, which represents kirtan, recitation of the names and glories of God. That ashram, which was called Svananda Sukhada Kunj and consisted of a moderate 2-story house, several small outbuildings, and a walled compound, was a gathering place for exalted souls. Previously, it had been the site of Lord Nityananda's Namhat, the place from whence Lord Nityananda inaugurated his preaching exploits in Bengal under the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Here, the Thakur recited and explained the Shrimad Bhagavatam and other topics regarding the conclusions of devotional service. Srila Gaura-kisora Das Babaji Maharaj would come and hear those talks with great delight. The Thakur often cited the behavior of Srila Gaura-kisora to elucidate the meaning of the word nirapeksha, indifference. He often discussed the unequaled renunciation, pure devotion, and attachment to Krishna that Babaji Maharaj displayed. In the days of the Thakur's retirement, the two souls met and associated in great happiness. For some time, Babaji Maharaj stayed in Sarabi Kunj and performed Hari Bhajan. His room, which adjoined the wall of the Kunj, has been preserved. Babaji Maharaj displayed fervent enthusiasm upon hearing the discourses of the Thakur. His only possessions were tulsi beads he wore around his neck and tulsi mala, rosary, he kept in his hand for counting his rounds. He also kept a few books such as Narottam Das Thakur's Prarthana and Prema Bhakti Chandrika. And sometimes he wore a torn cloth, sometimes he went naked. At other times he would utter harsh sounds of disgust for no apparent reason. Even though it appeared that Gaura-kisora Das Babaji was not a learned Sanskrit scholar, still the purport and conclusions of all scriptures were luminous in his heart and character. It was never possible for anyone to serve him, for he was never willing to accept any kind of service from any person. Whosoever witnessed his unearthly, genuine condition of renunciation was reminded of the pastimes of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. All kinds of divine powers and opulences were always waiting at his command, ready to serve him. Sometimes such powers would be manifest in the form of his appearing to be omniscient. He was always able to reveal the deceitful nature lying within the hearts of pretenders. Although a person resided outside his immediate purview, Srila Gaura-kisora could elaborately and scrutinizingly reveal the person's cheating nature, because he was in direct contact with Supersoul. This ability, however, was not his principal virtue. He exhibited the highest standard of devotion to the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna. Because of his exemplary character, he was recognized as the personification of the deepest degree of separation from Lord Shri Krishna. This is what distinguished him from most other Vaishnavas and what spread the luster of his lotus feet. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur has written, "Many young, clever, old, learned, foolish, proud, and reasonable persons came into contact with Srila Gaura-kisora Prabhu. yet they could not realize his real identity. This is indeed the mystic opulence of the devotees of Lord Krishna. Many persons came to consult with Srila Gaura-kisora Prabhu about their insignificant desires. They would always get suggestions, but those suggestions were usually the cause of their disappointment. Innumerable persons accepted the Babaji dress and acted as devotees of the Lord, but actually they were impostors, far away from being real sadhus. Srila Gaura-kisora never accepted such a false way of life. His sincerity was apparent in itself. His loving attitude was such that even when he obtained a very opulent offering, his renunciation predominated. Srila Gaura-kisora Das Babaji never displayed any distaste for those persons who were inimical to him. He also never manifested any special affection for those very dear to him. He would often express himself saying, "In this material world, I am alone in my service to Lord Krishna. Everyone is worshipable by me." Another noteworthy transcendental topic is that many materialistic foolish persons masquerading as devotees and imitating pure devotion would come and surround him. They would consider that they were his dear objects of his affection, while they engaged their minds in so many worldly sense objects. Srila Gaura-kisora Prabhu would never display any intention to drive them away, and also no symptoms of a compromising attitude. Section 2. Svananda Sukada Kunj. In 1898, Srila Gaura-kisora Das Babaji Maharaj, the embodiment of the highest boon in the succession of the Rupanuga Sampradaya, arrived, singing in a plaintive voice at the newly constructed Svananda Kunj. This transcendental crown jewel of the renounced order was wearing a cap made of tiger skin, was carrying a basket containing various items employed by him in his devotional service. After his arrival, he offered Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati 4 or 5 pieces of rope upon which to chant rounds of Harinam, a tilak stamp with the initials of Hare Krishna, Ha and Kri, and the tiger skin cap and other paraphernalia for worship of the Lord. Babaji Maharaj had previously received the basket and cap from his spiritual master, Shri Bhagavat Das Babaji. That same year, in the month of Magh, Babaji Maharaj initiated Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. The great Vaishnava often came to Sevananda Kunj to hear Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's explanations of the Shrimad Bhagavatam. He would usually arrive around 3 o'clock in the afternoon and leave around 5 o'clock. On several occasions he spent the night in a corner of Sevananda Kunj in a small hut with a tin roof. Sometimes he would stay in Pradumna Kunj, and then again he would fast, and under no circumstances accept prasad. In this way he would either fast, accept prasad, or cook for himself. Sometimes he would behave as if afflicted by the disease called Siraroja, insanity, and by blindness. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur arranged a balanced diet for him, but due to his dismay, Baba Maharaj continued to follow his program of unsurpassable renunciation, disregarding the aforementioned diet. He eventually lost his sight, almost fully, in both eyes. In the year 1908, Srila Gaura-kisora thoroughly lost his physical vision. In the following year, he stopped traveling and resided principally in Navadvip at Pradumna Kunj, and sometimes stayed at Godrum with the Thakur. Pradumna Kunj had previously been owned by Sarachandra Vasu of South Calcutta, but that gentleman died and the Kunj was inhabited by Babaji Maharaj. When he sojourned with the Thakur, he would chant japa and perform his internal service to Lord Krishna. Sometimes, becoming aloof from external bodily consciousness, he would be unaware of whether he was dressed or not, and he would go to swim in the Saraswati River with his clothes open. Thereafter, he would enter his small bhajan kutir. In a very deep voice would begin chanting the names of the gopis of Vrindavan. Section 3. the illusory universe. When it seemed that Gaura-kisora Das Babaji's eyesight was deteriorating, Srila Saraswati Thakur requested him to go to Calcutta for treatment. Thakur Bhaktivinoda also repeatedly requested him to go there, but Srila Gaura-kisora would reply, "I will never go to the illusory universe, Calcutta." Once, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur informed Babaji Maharaj that his servant, Srila Saraswati Thakur, would stay with him in Calcutta, and thus Babaji Maharaj would not have to suffer any inconvenience there. Upon hearing this, Srila Gaura-kisora Prabhu replied, "I will never accept service from Prabhu. Rather, I shall die by drowning. If I drown myself in the Ganges, I will become a ghost, so I will drown myself in the Saraswati." Repeating this statement, Sri Gaura-kisora then prostrate offered obeisances, running towards the Saraswati river, which flowed close to the entrance of Sevananda Kunj. Srila Saraswati Thakur pursued him, trying to dissuade him humbly and repeatedly requesting him to return. After this incident, he was not to be found for 45 days. Then, just as suddenly, he reappeared at Sevananda Kunj and announced, "I can't achieve Sri Krishna by killing myself. Nevertheless, I cannot tolerate anyone serving me." Although requested hundreds of times to take medicine, Srila Gaura-kisora never consented. Srila Gaura-kisora always observed the Ekadashi fast rigidly, rejecting even water. On other days, he often ate dried cracked rice soaked in water with chilies, or at other times simply earth from the bank of the Ganges. His renunciation was not artificial, however, but was symptomatic of his indifference to worldly existence. Section 4. From 1907 to 1908, Srila Saraswati Thakur lived in Mayapur at the Yoga Peeth. It was here that the Adhokshaja deity of Srila Jagannath Misra, the father of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was later unearthed. Before construction of the Yoga Peeth temple began, Gaura-kisora Das Babaji went there from Kulia on many occasions. During this period, he gave many instructions to Srila Saraswati Thakur, and Saraswati Thakur engaged in his guru's service. Once, although externally completely blind, Babaji Maharaj arrived alone at Sridham Mayapur at the Yoga Peeth in the early hours of the morning. Later that day, Srila Saraswati Thakur, amazed to see him, and realizing he must somehow have crossed the Ganges in the dead of night and walked several miles, inquired, "When did you arrive?" Babaji Maharaj replied, "I arrived at about 2 a.m. Completely astonished, Srila Saraswati Thakur then asked, "What was it that brought you here last night? How was it possible for you to see the path?" Babaji Maharaj answered, "Someone showed me the proper way." Srila Saraswati Thakur replied, "We can see with our external vision, and you appear to be blind. Who would bring you such a long distance by hand, and then upon arriving here suddenly leave in the middle of the night? How is that you were able to come? It must have been Shri Krishna who personally brought you here." Hearing this supposition, Srila Babaji Maharaj began to laugh slightly. The fact was that in those days, one could not walk from Kulia to Mayapur because there were no footpaths, and one could not take a boat because there were no landing places. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati again inquired, "Who brought you across the river?" Srila Gaura-kisora answered in the same amusing manner, "Someone took me across the river." His disciple could understand that the mysterious person was none other than Vrajanananda, Shri Krishna. Section 5. The real and pretender Vrajananandi. Once, while Srila Gaura-kisora was residing in a dharmasala in Kulia, Srila Saraswati Thakur asked him how he had lived at Vraj, and many questions about the residents of Vrindavan and the various devotees who were performing solitary worship there. Srila Saraswati Thakur specifically asked about the Bhajananandis, who were reputed to be perfectly self-realized souls. Upon hearing the question, Srila Gaura-kisora Goswami laughed again and again and told Saraswati Thakur, "They're all impostors." One of the Babajis in question, who lived at Shushram Sarovar in Vrindavan, was famed as a great Bhajananandi. He had a few disciples who were also reputed to be perfectly self-realized. But Babaji Maharaj did not even slightly agree to their being genuine. After some time, these pretenders became afflicted with leprosy of the throat and left their bodies after suffering terribly. They had resided in the Dham, and with their intelligence bent upon sense gratification, and they had behaved offensively toward Babaji Maharaj. Section 6. Deception and actual residence in the Holy Dham. Once, a young devotee, very anxiously desiring to perform devotional service, resided in the Holy Dham of Navadvip, came and revealed his intentions to Babaji Maharaj. This young devotee had made arrangements to remain in the Dham as a physician, to buy medicines by begging for the money, and to thus treat the sick and infirm. He considered that in this way he would be forming his bhajan and also sometimes simultaneously performing great welfare activity. To receive confirmation of his plans, he had come to consult Srila Babaji Maharaj. When he arrived and presented his proposal, he quoted the following verses describing Murari Gupta in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Murari Gupta never accepted charity from friends, nor did he accept money from anyone. He practiced as a physician and maintained his family with his earnings. As Murari treated his patients, by his mercy both their bodily and spiritual diseases subsided. Srila Babaji Maharaj could understand the young man's inherent insincerity and the pretenses of him wanting to live in the Dham, and revealed the defects of his plan by saying, "Murari Gupta is an eternal associate of Lord Chaitanya and is always resident in the Holy Dham. He never expressed his intention to stay in the Lord's Dham by unjustly supporting himself so as to enjoy sense gratification. He never, at the expense of any temple, supported his family, nor was he ever interested in earning money to fill his stomach. He neither accepted charity from his friends nor anyone else. He was the reservoir of ecstatic love of Lord Gaur. By his mercy one can achieve love for Gaur. Whoever he would treat would become completely freed from all disease and obtain love for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Without following the standard of his character, if Murari Gupta is imitated in a motivated way, then one will be forced to suffer the result of his misdeeds. You are suffering from the disease of material existence yourself, so how will you properly treat others? You should incessantly and earnestly pray for the mercy of Srila Murari Gupta. Then you will be able to understand what real benevolence is. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has stated that sincere intelligence is exhibited by chanting the holy name of Hari and giving up all pretension. Those who chant with material intentions are considered unintelligent. You should renounce this sort of thinking and devote yourself seriously to the process of hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, your devotion will simply be lust, and everything will be ruined. The desire to administer free medicine for the sake of personal prestige and the desire to reside in the Dham have nothing in common. A person interested in fruitive work can never live in the Dham. Hearing these instructions, the doctor asked, "What should I do?" Srila Gaura-kisora Babaji replied, "If you actually want the benefit of residing in the Dham, then you should first give up these ideas you are entertaining. Abandon this misconceived notion of benefiting materialistic persons by distributing free medical treatment. Those who are resolute in performing worship unto the Supreme Lord Hari will never discharge any unfavorable activities, and they will perform only activities favorable to devotional service. Beyond this, all other activities will be the cause of deep conditioning. If you want to support yourself in the way you have planned, then you should leave the Dham and return to your former residence. Do not reside within the supreme abode of the Absolute Truth, Sri Krishna, and earn your livelihood deceitfully. Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada commented on the two verses cited as follows. It should be noted that a grihastha householder must not make his livelihood by begging from anyone. Every householder of the higher caste should engage himself in his own occupational duty, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, but he should not engage in the service of others, for this is the duty of a Sudra. One should simply accept whatever he earns by his own profession. Murari Gupta could treat both body and spiritual disease because he was a physician by profession and a great devotee of the Lord in terms of spiritual advancement. This is an example of service to humanity. One disease, which is called adhyatmika, or material disease, pertains to the body, but the main disease is spiritual. The living entity is eternal, but somehow or other, when in contact with material energy, he's subjected to the repetition of birth, death, old age, and disease. The physicians of the modern day should learn from Murari Gupta. Although modern philanthropic physicians open gigantic hospitals, there are no hospitals to cure the material disease of the spirit soul. As pointed out by Babaji Maharaj, Murari Gupta was an eternal resident of the Dham and an eternal associate of the Lord. Thus his activities should not be imitated by one who does not have the power to cure the disease of material existence.